There are conversations happening behind closed doors that explain almost everything that teachers complain about today. But the fact of the matter is that most of us will never get to hear them or would be a part of them. But what we will see is we'll see the results. Like when you write a referral and absolutely nothing happens to the kid, or the kid's back in class by fifth period after flipping over all the desks in third period. I mean, how does that even happen? Well, I'm going to pull back the curtain and I'm going to explain to you exactly why. And in this video, I want to walk you through 6 of the biggest reasons why school administrators can't discipline students the way that we wish they would, or even the way that they wish that they could. And the number one reason is discipline decisions are often tied to funding and not to fairness. And I want to let that sink in for just a minute, because you would think that discipline would be about correcting behavior, or about what's good for the student, or about what's best for the school. But it's not. A lot of times it's about what's best for the funding formula. And here's how that works. Suspensions and expulsion numbers, they don't just stay in the building. They get reported upward. And they can and do affect state funding, and they can and do at times affect the accreditation standing of a school. So when a serious decision comes up, it's not just your principal making that decision. Those decisions rise to district level leadership, and they're looking at a number that says if we fall below this line, then district funding is in jeopardy. And what that means is teacher raises are in jeopardy if you actually get a raise. Busing is in jeopardy. Support staff salaries are in jeopardy. And so suddenly everything is affected. So when a consequence gets softened, and I really need you to hear this, it's not always personal. It's not always because the admin doesn't like you. I mean, maybe sometimes it is, but more likely the people above your administrator, they're making a calculation, and it's a calculation that you and I never see. And honestly, I don't think I would ever want to make, because we might find ourselves doing the very thing that we don't like them doing. Before we get too far, I don't want you to leave empty-handed, so I created a teacher survival toolkit for you that it's going to help you with these issues. It's free, it's 100% free, and it's always free. It's in the description, or you can get it there at the QR code on the screen. So make sure you jump over there and you grab it. Okay, let's get to number 2. Oftentimes, administrators, they're managing legal liability more than they're managing behavior. And this shows up most when you deal with students with IEPs. And I want to be very clear right here before anybody gets fired up and starts sending me a bunch of emails, is that this is not about kids with autism or traumatic brain injuries or true special education needs, because I work with those kids every single day, and they are hands down some of the most joyful, best behaved kids on the campus. And I absolutely love them. What I'm talking about is when the IEP becomes a weapon, and it's used as a blanket that protects behavior no matter how bad it gets, or it serves as a barrier that either softens the consequences or it prevents a real consequences. And I hate this, because I have personally watched students over my almost 20-year career. They're protected all the way from kindergarten to graduation, only to end up locked up in prison not long after they graduate, because somewhere along the way, we taught them that there's always a way out. And so today, every discipline decision carries with it a liability calculation. It's a parent threatening to call a lawyer, and they can, and they do. And that will often reshape a discipline decision. And that discipline decision then reshapes your entire classroom, and it reshapes the entire campus. And I'm not saying that every parent does that, because the truth of the matter is that most of them don't. But there are plenty, and I do mean plenty, that are looking for the opportunity. And there are plenty of lawyers, more lawyers than we can probably count, that are happy to take the case, not because they want to help the kid, or at least that's my opinion, They're just looking for a payday. And number 3, staffing shortages mean that they sometimes can't back you the way you or they want. And I would be very surprised right now if somebody was watching and that there wasn't some sort of budget crisis in your district right now, because Houston ISD has lost something like 17,000 experienced multi-year teachers over the last couple of years. They've been replaced by first-year teachers who can't hang on long enough to get a good job. And I mean, that's done a lot for solving their budget problems, but every one of you and I know how brutal year one can be as a teacher, even if you're in a healthy school. And that kind of shortage, that doesn't just stay contained to the front office. That's the type of shortage that walks directly into your classroom, and it looks like you're having about 40 kids in every period. And so one of the biggest fallouts from all these budget crises is that alternative placement schools are either overflowing or they're completely eliminated, because districts don't have the dollars to staff them properly. And so what happens is chronically disruptive students is oftentimes they're sent right back to your classroom. Not because your administrator doesn't see the problem, but because there's genuinely nowhere else to put them. And so disruptive students have learned that they can disrupt class and get rewarded when they get themselves out of class. And here's the thing. Everything that we're talking about right now, it falls directly on your shoulders, because you have to deal with the fallout of the systemic problems of a systemically broken system. So if any of this is hitting close to home to you, I want you to know that you don't have to struggle alone. I want you to grab a discovery call with me. The link's in the description or the QR on the screen. Either way, I just want you to go get it. So let's move on to number 4. Administrators' evaluations are tied to metrics that reward looking good on paper, but not actually running a good school. And I've personally sat in meetings with state oversight officials about referrals, and they're asking why our out-of-school suspension numbers were so high in comparison to the number of high-level incidents. And the message underneath of that question is you shouldn't be assigning OSS unless it's a high-level infraction. But I want you to know that that's not true, because when a student is chronically disruptive or chronically disrespectful, OSS is appropriate so that the student knows that there are boundaries. And when you go too far, an OSS says that you're no longer welcome at school, at least temporarily. In any case, there's a lot of pressure when state officials walk into your school and they begin to question your discipline practices that subtly suggest that you need to make a change because the numbers are too high. And here's another thing. The same thing happens with graduation rate. I mean, have you ever noticed how a senior's absences suddenly don't matter as much? Well, that's not by accident, because graduation rates are calculated by cohort. A student has to graduate with the class they started with in the 9th grade. And when they don't, the graduation rate drops and the district looks bad on a report that goes to the state. So what's the quiet suggestion? Find a way to make an exception for chronically absent students. So they do. So decisions get bent towards minimizing numbers instead of addressing the root cause. And I'm not saying that it's right, because it's not, but it is real. And most of the time, and maybe not all the time, but most of the time, it has nothing to do with whether your administrator cares about the kid or whether your administrator cares about the teacher. It's actually the pressure that they face every single day, and it forces them into those decisions. Number 5, administrators are absorbing pressures from directions that you and I never see. Superintendents, school boards, state officials, parents with a direct line to the Department of Education. And believe me, they will call, because I have personally had more than one DOE complaint land on my desk over decisions that I've made. But administrators have to absorb that. And here's the part that gets missed, is that in most cases, they can't talk about it. They can't just come out and blame their bosses publicly or stand up in a staff meeting and tell you the real story, because those words find their way back to the exact people who would use them as an excuse to end that person's career. And in most cases, and it's not all cases, but in most cases, principals are not politicians. But being a principal is a political position. They may not want it to be, but it is. And in a lot of communities, especially smaller ones, being fired from a job in the wrong way, that doesn't just cost you a paycheck. It ends up costing you your retirement, and it potentially makes you completely unemployable in your own hometown. So what happened? That pressure causes administrators to keep their mouths shut. But as teachers, we often look at that and we see that silence as them not caring about us or fighting for us. And I get it, because I have felt that exact same way many, many times. But most of the time, the silence isn't indifference. It's a principal who is absorbing a problem, and they're not saying a word about it, because running their mouth could cost them everything that they've worked for. And number 6, and this is the one that I really wanted to stick with you. At one point, every single administrator started exactly where you are today. Many of them stood in the very same hallway that you stand in. They're just like you. They talk to their colleagues about what they would do differently if it were them, and how they would change things if they just had the job. And we believe it. And then they get the job and they find out that the system is bigger than any one person sitting in that office. And a lot of them look to the role specifically because they want to change things from the inside out. And what they discover is that they can't. Not because they don't want to, but because they don't have the authority to actually make the changes that are necessary. And I'll be honest with you. The whole reason why I went into education in the first place is because I didn't like the direction it was headed. And I wanted to change it. And almost 20 years later, I've learned something very, very humbling. I can't fix the system. Public education in America is systemically broken, and one person, even 1,000 people, they aren't going to undo that from the classroom or from an office. But what I can do and what you can do is I can affect the life of the student that's sitting in front of me today. And I don't want you to ever overlook how much that actually matters. And that's not a consolation prize. It may feel like one, but it's not. That's the actual job. So here's what I want you to take with you. When your administrator makes a decision that seems to be stupid or dumb, and it doesn't make any sense to you, before you decide that it's personal, I want you to remember that there's probably a really good reason why, and it most likely has nothing to do with you personally. Because these are decisions that were made in conversations that you and we're never a part of. And guess what? We're never going to be invited to those conversations. But knowing that will empower you to teach with confidence instead of resentment. And it'll help you set the tone for when you walk into your classroom. So here's the thing. Teaching's tough. It's always been tough, and it's always going to be tough. We work inside of a system that is fundamentally flawed, and that takes a real toll on people that are actually doing the work. But if you'd like to learn more about the flaws of the system and how you can navigate them, then I want to encourage you to check out one of these 2 videos. My name is John, your guide to surviving teacher burnout, and I want you to stay strong and keep teaching.